Would anyone notice if it came off?
Right. Would anyone notice? Would we notice? What would it impact? What would it cost us? What would we lose? What would we gain?
Well, and we're talking about firefighting and treating everything as urgent, but I think there's something really empowering that says if you look at the list and you say these are the things we keep getting pushed, it's like, should they have been there in the first place?
Yeah.
Right? Like are we just saying we're going to address that stuff, but we really don't have any intention of addressing? And that's not to say that's good or bad. Like there's no judgment in it. I think it's to be really just sit and be honest with what's happening in our how we're operating. Are we aware of how we're operating? And then the thing that I think, you mentioned boundaries. I think sometimes teams don't feel safe to slow down, to
Mhm.
pause, and just kinda check in. What's actually happening right now?
Hi, and welcome to the Pause Before You Lead. I'm Alicia Saint.
And I'm Heather Haigh.
Together, we've both led teams inside large organizations, and over the past decade, we've coached and partnered with hundreds of leaders and teams navigating complexity. We've seen, felt, heard, and supported leaders through the challenging and sometimes really messy parts of leadership. And while a lot has changed, many of the patterns that quietly take leaders off track just keep showing up.
We work with leaders who don't want to lose momentum, but who know that clearer thinking is what makes momentum sustainable. This podcast is for leaders who are moving fast, leading teams, and making decisions under constant pressure. And leaders who know there's a better way to think, lead, and respond in those moments.
Each week, we bring you real conversations drawn from our work with leaders and teams, where speed matters, stakes are high, and the quality of your thinking shapes everything. So in each episode, we're going to pause, just long enough to think more clearly, to see what's really going on, make better decisions, and build high-value teams.
Whether you're listening before the day takes over, on your way to work, or in the middle of a full day, this is your pause without losing momentum. So, before we begin, take a breath and join us.
Welcome, everyone, to the Pause Before You Lead. I'm Alicia Saint.
And I'm Heather Haigh.
And together this week, our topic is everything really a fire? I know we often operate like everything's on fire all the time. And so we're inviting you to pause for a moment in this week's conversation to ask yourself, is everything really on fire? So, Heather, I know you've got a great story for us this week around this topic. So I invite you to kick us
Yeah.
off.
It's interesting because if we just look at teams that are serving clients, so teams that are very client focused, and I work with a lot of teams that are very client focused, I think it's easy to start to feel like when you are delivering an exceptional client experience, that any phone call that a client puts into your office needs to be handled as an emergency, as a fire. And not necessarily that all calls are equal, but more that desire to give that exceptional service starts to create this responsiveness that's really reactionary. And that reaction can get in the way. So I'm thinking about a team specifically who was facing this challenge where they They knew that they wanted to tackle some larger, bigger projects on their team, some efficiencies in the business, things that where they knew they could put in better systems that could make things run more smoothly. But those priorities kept getting put on the back burner because clients calling in were constantly, well, this has to be dealt with right away. This has to be dealt with right away. This has to be. And so that urgent response to every single call meant they never took the time to actually sit and think through what space would be available to us if we streamline some of these efficiencies in our business. Because right now, there's a lot of old systems and they are very time consuming. And so if we keep operating with these time consuming, old, antiquated models, that's slowing us down. And the reaction to the client calls being a priority meant they would never take time away to sit down and map that out. And so month after month, quarter after quarter, and unfortunately, year after year, some of these same challenges would surface and you could feel the frustration of the team. Like, we really need to tackle this. But the constant firefighting got in the way. And there was this feeling that they couldn't possibly leave the desk to be able to tackle that because that would interfere with their client experience, right? Of being always available. And, I'm speaking about one team in this moment, but it's not exclusive to that team. I've consistently seen that challenge with any type of team that's operating with a very client-centric, client-focused dynamic, that often the reactionary of the unplanned day-to-day gets in the way of the bigger picture strategic moves that could have real change for both this way the system's operating, but also those clients they're trying so hard to serve.
Hmm. And I think when you share that story, thank you. That's a great story. I'm substituting client could be internal client, right? It
Yes.
can be, if you're in a support function, right? I used to run customer service. There was just constant. I mean, if you asked let's take a step back and really look at the bigger picture and what no, because there was every day there was just, another customer or another sales team, another operations team, whatever. There was just constant fires. And so, yeah, I think you can substitute client for an external client, an internal client, a demanding senior boss. It's just when everything feels like it's on fire.
Yeah.
How do you prioritize? B, how do you hold to those priorities? How do you create those boundaries? And I know you've got another good story for us around that. When it feels like every day you come in and within the first 5 minutes, your whole to-do list is blown up, right? It's like,
Yeah.
well, I thought I was going to have time for that, but clearly that's going on tomorrow's to-do list.
Well, and it's interesting because I was having a conversation the other day where this idea of, not what do you put off, but what do you keep putting on the to-do list tomorrow? And what's the impact of moving it to
Mhm.
tomorrow, right? And I think that is such an interesting observation. If we can step outside of the urgency, step outside of the fire and say, where's the stuff that we just keep rolling down the list? Right? It's there on each day's to-do list, but it just keeps getting bumped to the next day, to the next day, to the next day. And you just sort of think about energetically, what's the impact on our own energy and how we feel about our productivity, to see those same things get moved from one day to the next, to the next, to the next. Like, just I know the impact that has on me when I have certain things and I just keep moving them onto the top of the next day's to-do list, the impact that has. And when a team is experiencing that,
Mhm.
there's a couple of things that happen. One is the frustration of we're just not getting to those things, but the other is you start to doubt whether those things are really important, either by the leader or by the team, when things keep getting pushed, right? So
Mhm.
there's sort of this, like, there's the who we want to be, but how, and then how we're actually operating.
Mhm. And I think there's a really cool even thought with that is if flip it on its head a little bit and go, as a leader, if you pause for a moment and just really think about your own to-do list, let's say over the last month, and whether it's your own or the one you're co-creating with your team. And wouldn't it be cool to look at the end of the 30 days and go, what, to your point, what do we keep pushing out? What do we keep rolling, into the next month or into the next quarter? And then to pause and really ask yourself, how important is it?
Yeah.
Really? Really? Is it a
And if
nice
it
to
is
do?
really important, what are we gonna do differently so this doesn't keep getting pushed?
And why? Why does it keep getting pushed? What is getting put ahead of it each and every time? Because that's where you start to see the fires. Everything's on fire all the time. Why? Because maybe you don't have the processes put in. You won't slow down long enough to put the right process in place. You won't do the right training. You're not helping onboard people, adequately or sufficiently, or people are burning out because they're overwhelmed. Like there's so many reasons that could be at play in the system. And that could be, I really love that you brought that forward. That could be a really powerful piece of data that could
Yeah,
help you to just like pause and go, wow, I'm really seeing this. What's underneath that? What's getting put ahead of it? How important is it really? What happens if we took it off the list completely? What if we just said
would
we're not
anyone notice? Would anyone notice if it came
right?
off?
Would anyone notice? Would we notice? What would it impact? What would it cost us? What would we lose? What would we gain?
Well, and we're talking about firefighting and treating everything as urgent, but I think there's something really empowering that says if you look at the list and you say these are the things we keep getting pushed, it's like, should they have been there in the first place?
Yeah.
Right? Like, are we just saying we're gonna address that stuff, but we really don't have any intention of addressing? And that's not to say that's good or bad, like, there's no judgment in it. I think it's to be really just sit and be honest with what's happening in our how we're operating. Are we aware of how we're operating? And then the thing that I think, you mentioned boundaries. I think sometimes teams don't feel safe to slow down, to
Mhm.
pause, and just kinda check in. What's actually happening right now?
Mhm. I've got a great like, can I just share a really cool story that I think relates to what you just brought up? I had a friend at work, a friend, and she's Clarity. And so, as someone who works from Clarity, right? She can work slow, right? Methodical, very logical, really looks for data. Okay. And there was this moment in when she where she was working where things were very chaotic. Very chaotic, and it was like this for some time, and so when there was the chaos, she was the only person in Clarity, 'cause I get again, it wasn't we didn't have the analysis, but my guess was there was a lot of impact,
Mm,
and so she was trying to slow people down a little bit and go like and she was asking questions like, "Okay, what are we really trying to get at here, and what's the root cause?" And anyways, it ended up becoming such a friction for the team because they were like, "Well, why aren't you working as frenetically as we are? Why aren't you treating everything like a fire and everything's on fire? Why are you acting so calm and cool and collected?" And it was so interesting because everyone's like started turning on her because they're like, "Why aren't you acting like the rest of us?" And she's like looking at them going, "Because you're all crazy." Like you're just running in 18 different directions, and she was but yet because people weren't valuing what she was bringing, which was the calm to the fire or, maybe bringing the water to the fire if you want to say it that way,
mhm.
right? The power of the pause. Where are we running to? Why
Yeah.
are we all running in different directions? What are we running from? What are we running to?
Oh my gosh, so many great questions you just presented just in that brief little right? Like, yes. And it is interesting how the interpretation of someone else's urgency.
Yes.
Right? Like, in that moment, how we can if you're operating the same operating model that I'm operating in, my assumptions are one thing, and if you're operating in a model that's different from my operating
Mhm.
model, my assumptions are not and probably in both cases, we're wrong, right?
Yes.
Like, not all impacts love to be in overwhelm and in chaos. In fact, a lot of impacts don't like that, even though together that can be created. And sometimes we see clarity people who are taking on a ton of stuff too, and
Yeah.
they're in a different operating model of overwhelm, and so, right, like, you can
Mhm.
it it's not a all likes, it all differences
No,
are differences.
no.
That being said, I think what it's hard, I think, as a leader to recognize is that your firefighting is creating a dynamic within the system that
Yes.
everyone thinks that is the way the model needs to operate.
Yes.
And so if you're peer to peer, you might be able to do the clarity kind of slow down thing and invite and still get pushback and stand in that with but if you're a member of a team where that urgency firefighting model is the model, you're not likely to put up your hand and challenge the status quo of that because it's like, well, that's obviously how this team operates. So it
Mhm.
really comes to the leader to say, what, and I, like, what if we slowed down in this moment? What's at risk if we take a pause to assess? And I think that it doesn't have to be, we're gonna stop everything for 2 days and go and have a team offsite and be completely not available. It doesn't have to be long period stretches, but it does have to be this invitation that the leader needs to lead to say, "Let's just slow down for a moment and assess that how we're operating is in the best interest of the client, the team, the stakeholder, like all the systems that we're operating within.
Mhm.
This firefighting, is this good for everyone?"
Well, and I'm just thinking again of an image that came, if you're in that firefighting and you're standing over there and you're putting out that fire, but meanwhile there's a much bigger one that's raging behind you, but you're so busy going, well, that's the first one that I saw. And so everyone's pointed that way. Meanwhile, what's coming behind you is, 10 times worse. Or, the whole idea of like just running through the burning building. Well, what happens when you get to the other side? Like, there's nothing left, right? So, yeah, yeah, the real importance of the what as a leader are you role modeling, and also the impact on well-being, because the nervous system is so activated when you're operating that fight and flight kind of mode of firefighting, right? And it's hard to even think about stopping or slowing down to take a breath or to take a pause because your whole system is activated, right? And as a whole, just think about the collective system, how much energy is happening, right? When that's happening. And I'm just imagining that story back, and there's my girlfriend sort of sitting in the middle with this, like, like a Zen thing happening, and the frenetic energy can't take that in, right? It's like, what is happening over there? Like, that can't work because you're in reaction, right? You're in so much reactivity, and it just narrows perspective, right? It really narrows perspective.
It does, and I think it takes courage sometimes to be the voice that slows things down.
Yeah.
So recognizing that this sounds simple but isn't always easy. I've had a number of conversations with leaders and just sort of invited them when they come to those frenetic meetings where everyone's on fire and everything's intense and everything's urgent and everything's a priority. What role can the leader play in showing up with a sense of calm?
Mhm.
And even if it's something as simple as to start the meeting to say, what's the desired outcome of this meeting? Because that kind of just takes this moment for, rather than, well, there's this and 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 there's, it's like, okay, let's just take a moment. What needs to be the takeaway from this conversation? And when invited to pause for that moment, sure, there is going to be pushback initially because people are like, this is strange. We've never done this. This isn't how we operate. The slowdown feels like what? But to your point, if you're only focusing on the fire that's directly in front of you, are you observing everything else around you?
Mhm.
Are you seeing beyond the immediate moment to what's
Mhm.
ahead? And really, in a team that has become so influenced by the leader's energy, it really falls to the leader to start to lead that shift,
Mhm.
even if it's not your natural operating model. And as an impact person, I know that when I feel like there's a lot of pressure, I like to Let's just go, let's just go, let's just go, let's just go. But what happens if I operate and I put that pressure on everyone around me,
Mhm.
right? Things start to fall apart because the breathing space actually creates greater clarity to decide what are we going to prioritize? What boundaries, if any, do we need to set? And how will we sustain them once we set them?
Mhm.
And you mentioned that there was an example of this, I think. I remember a leader saying to me, you teach people, Heather, how you want to be treated. And so if I kept taking on more and taking on more and taking on more and taking, no one was going to assume I was drowning. So the boundary or the you need to be willing to say, like, I'm going to put my phone on call forward for a period of time so I can tackle the thing that's most important to my role right now. And people can leave a message and people can wait for a response. But if I've taught everyone I'm instantaneously going to react with everything that you throw at me at that moment, I'm always available, I'm always on, like, I have to help them unlearn it because I set that model,
Mhm.
right? And so the beginning is awkward and uncomfortable because I'm changing the rules based on expectation I set.
Mhm.
The only way to get some breathing room in any of this and to be able to actually start to focus on what matters most versus everything being a fire is to start to put some boundaries in, to start to set some guidelines that say, here's how we're going to handle these things are fires. These things are important, but not fires. These things actually aren't that important. Right? So we can start to almost bucket some of those things, but you
Mhm.
can't do that if you're trying to organize that with your Mach 10 with your hair on fire.
Yeah.
Like, the pause has to happen first.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, I
What
think a question really when you were talking about that, I could just feel myself slowing down, right? It's going from like that survival mode, like everything, my hair's on fire, to okay, that Eisenhower matrix, like what is actually urgent? What actually is urgent and needs to be done immediately? What's urgent and needs to be done soon, what can be deferred, what can be delegated, and just being able to move from that place of everything's an emergency, we're in survival mode, to a place of still the need to solve today's emergencies and leave time and space and capacity and resilience for building tomorrow. That's right, like, and I don't know what that balance is, and I'm sure it's different for every single team. But the opportunity is there is balance. It's not just solving yesterday's emergencies, today's emergencies. Yes, and
Yeah. Well, and I think if you're in that high speed, everything's on fire,
client is first all the time.
system, you cannot think strategically. You cannot think bigger picture. You cannot, like, because you're so stuck in that mode. So there's got to be something that sort of helps the whole team get a little bit calmer, a little
Mm,
bit more regulated
mhm,
to be able to identify for them, for that team, what uniquely are the priorities and what uniquely are the ways they want to operate. And there will still be some fires. It's not to say you're getting rid of all the fires, but it's to say somehow everything became a fire.
mhm,
And so we need to slow down to actually figure out what the real fires are and what's the stuff we've just been operating in a specific way for such a long time. We don't even notice what's a fire and what's not,
mhm,
right? So
mhm,
that, like, I feel like that ability for people to think with more intentionality, to decide if there's boundaries that need to be set, to clarify if we're using the matrix of, urgent and important.
mhm,
Urgent but not important, important but not urgent, right? And then the stuff that
mhm,
doesn't matter at all, why are we even doing this, right? In that bottom quadrant, why are we still holding on to this? You can't do that exploration operating at the pace you were operating when everything's being treated
mhm,
as fire. There has to be the bridge between a different way of operating and how you're currently, and that bridge I think, starts with the pause, and the leader needs to model that.
Yeah. 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 And I think as you're saying that, I'm also noticing it's not just on the leader, right? It starts with the leader
Mhm.
and noticing what's the energy that I'm creating. Am I operating like everything's on fire, right?
Yes.
What am I rewarding, right? Do I
Nice
reward,
question.
yeah, do I reward those people that have the to-do list and they've got 10 things off and it's not necessarily the most important, but they got a lot done? Um, and then as a team, are we really clear on the priorities?
Mm.
And sitting with your team and saying, "Wow, like, is this working for anybody? Because it's not working for me. How about the rest of you?" And everyone would just put up, just say, "Yeah, actually, it's not. Okay." And what are those little key pieces of data, like we just discovered in our discussion? What are those key pieces of data that you might be able to use to start to bring some evidence to the team, to the conversation that says, "I'm noticing,
Mm. Yeah.
I'm wondering about, I'm curious about." We keep saying this is important, and we never get to it.
Well, there's what are we putting off for sure, and also there have we defined what we see as productive as being constantly reactive? Like, is there an identity piece about who this team is and the way in which we serve our clients or the way in which we serve our internal partners, the way in which we operate as a team, as a collective that
Yeah.
needs to change to be redefined because maybe what we've been valuing and rewarding is not what we need for the team of the future. Like this isn't who we need to be operating from here. And so I also think that there's some caution around it being a bad or assessing of bad patterns of before,
No.
that instead to say, what do we want to keep about how we've operated? What do we want to change about how we've operated?
Yeah.
And to your point about data points, like the more we can see how we've been working,
Mhm.
what's been deferred, what is getting prioritized or falling through the cracks, the more you understand about that through the slowing down, the faster you can move into a new or shift into a new momentum. So I
Mhm.
think that there's some identity questions there that come in, right? Through a reflection. Do we need to be defined how we've previously defined ourselves?
Is it working? Right, so
Yeah.
that powerful question, is it working? All right, well, again, we always have a lot to offer, in our conversation and on our topic about, is it working? Is it working to operate like everything is an emergency, everything is on fire? And if it's not, hopefully from today's discussion, you've heard a few thoughts or a few questions that encourage you to take a pause and just
Um,
imagine what is the energy, what is the culture, what am I creating, and is it working? Yeah,
yeah. Well, and that redefining the identity, right? That calm leadership is not passive,
right. The person in the middle, the Zen person, right, is actually what you need.
can bring some clear thinking, some strategic thinking,
Thinking,
some prioritization, and new ways of
where are we
operating.
going? Where are we headed? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Thanks so
Beautiful.
much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great week.
Yeah.
See you
And
next week.
remember, pause before you lead.
That's right. And we'll see you next week.
Thanks for joining the Pause Before You Lead. If this conversation sparked something for you, share it. Because more leaders need space to think clearly in the moments that matter.
Follow or subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and let us know what's on your mind. We shape these conversations for you.
Before you move on to what's next, pause. Just for a moment.
And notice, what might change if you led from here?